Is there a hidden force secretly controlling the government? The term deep state echoes through political debates, sparking intense controversy. But what does it really mean? Who is being accused? And what does it reveal about the complex workings of power in America? Politicians often use deep state to describe an alleged network. This network supposedly includes unelected officials and bureaucrats. Sometimes, private entities like corporations are also included. These individuals are accused of manipulating government policy. They are said to operate behind the scenes. Their actions, it's claimed, undermine elected leaders and their agendas. However, this concept is highly debated. Its definition is fluid and often depends on who is using the term. It's frequently deployed as a political weapon. One common target is career government bureaucrats. These are civil servants in agencies like the FBI, CIA, and State Department. They are seen as permanent fixtures, unlike political appointees. Critics, particularly from certain political factions, accuse these officials of resistance. They claim bureaucrats obstruct or sabotage policies they dislike. This framing suggests a deliberate hidden agenda. Yet many argue this view is a misrepresentation. They say it confuses routine bureaucratic processes or institutional checks and balances with a sinister plot. It overlooks the nonpartisan role of civil servants. Intelligence and military officials are also sometimes implicated. Some theories suggest these groups form a shadow government. They are accused of operating independently of elected oversight. Historical secrecy around covert operations fuels these suspicions. For example, some have claimed intelligence community members from previous administrations leaked information. This was allegedly done to damage a new presidency. The term can also extend to powerful private sector actors. This includes Wall Street financiers or defense contractors. They are accused of colluding with government insiders. The goal, it's claimed, is to protect their own interests. This perspective highlights the influence of money and corporate power on policy. It points to a blurring line between public and private influence. Opposition figures and political enemies are frequently labeled as part of the deep state. In highly polarized environments, the term becomes a tool for discrediting opponents. It's used to dismiss criticism or investigations. Accusations of a deep state plot can be used to explain away political challenges. It shifts blame from policy failures or scrutiny onto a hidden, malevolent force. This simplifies complex political dynamics. The term deep state has international roots. It comes from Turkey's derin devlet. This referred to military and intelligence networks operating outside democratic control. Applying this term to the U.S. context is controversial. Scholars note that U.S. bureaucracies are generally more transparent. They are also fragmented, not a single unified cabal. Unlike authoritarian regimes, the U.S. system has checks and balances. These are designed to prevent unchecked power. Critics argue the deep state label ignores these fundamental differences. Belief in a deep state is often linked to political affiliation. It is more prevalent among conservatives. Liberals, conversely, tend to dismiss it as a conspiracy theory. This partisan divide highlights how the term functions. It's less about a shared understanding of government structure. It's more about political identity and distrust of opposing factions or institutions. The deep state remains a politically charged label, It can touch upon valid concerns about government power or outside influence, but it is frequently used as a rhetorical weapon. Its validity is highly subjective. It depends heavily on one's political perspective and trust in institutions. Understanding the term requires looking beyond the rhetoric. While politicians target bureaucrats, some analysts propose a different deep state. They argue the real power lies not within the federal workforce itself. Instead, it resides in the contractor state. This view suggests a network of powerful external entities. These include megacorporations, particularly defense contractors. They profit significantly from federal spending. State and local governments are also part of this network. They rely heavily on federal dollars. While criticizing federal bureaucracy, they lobby intensely for their share of funding. Taxpayer-subsidized non-profit organizations are included. Many have multi-million-dollar budgets. A significant portion of their revenue comes from government grants and contracts. Career members of Congress from both parties are seen as key players. Their long tenure and influence over funding decisions make them central to this system. They perpetuate the flow of federal money. This contractor state fuels deficit spending. It steers funds through complex federal programs. It uses public money to employ millions in the private sector. They are seen as the true force behind waste, fraud, and abuse. This is often blamed on federal bureaucrats. However, many bureaucrats are simply managing grants and contracts designed by this system. Consider the numbers. The private workforce paid by federal funds is vast. It is more than 3 times larger than the on-payroll federal civilian workforce. This includes contractors and grantees. In 1960, there were about 1.8 million federal civilian workers. Today, that number is roughly 2.2 million. It has remained relatively stable for decades. Meanwhile, the number of people paid by federal grants and contracts has soared. It now stands at around 7 million. This includes millions of contractors and grantees. Eliminating the entire federal workforce would have a surprisingly small impact on spending. It would reduce total federal spending by less than 5%. This highlights where the bulk of the money goes. In 2020, total federal spending was about $6.2 trillion. The cost of the federal workforce was around $292 billion. Removing them would leave about 95% of spending untouched. The Washington swamp isn't just in D.C. The beneficiaries of federal spending are spread across the country. States like Florida, for example, host many federal employees, Medicare recipients, and businesses receiving defense contracts. This demonstrates that federal spending is deeply embedded nationwide. It supports local economies and industries. This creates a broad constituency invested in maintaining the flow of funds. Congress plays a direct role in directing funds. Federal bureaucrats distribute money based on congressional mandates. In 2021, over $630 billion went to contractors and services. This amount is more than double the cost of federal workers' wages and benefits. Aided by thousands of staff, Congress controls day-to-day operations and funding decisions. They decide who gets the money. The largest contracts often go to military-industrial complex corporations. Nonprofits also receive significant government funding. This creates powerful lobbies with vested interests. Federal contractors have actively worked to weaken oversight. They are major contributors to political campaigns. Studies show that businesses contributing to politicians often receive more contracts. Until the mid-1990s, it was harder to fully consider past performance when awarding contracts. By design, federal agencies often lacked the staff or authority to challenge bidding rules. They struggled to police fraud or performance failures. Many federal programs relying heavily on contractors appear on the Government Accountability Office's high-risk list. These programs often show the worst cost overruns and performance issues. This suggests a systemic problem with the contracting model. Understanding the deep state debate requires looking at U.S. history. Unlike many European nations, the U.S. has a long-standing discomfort with a strong, centralized state. This dates back to the Founding Fathers. Alexander Hamilton argued for an energetic executive branch. He believed it needed expertise. Thomas Jefferson favored governance by elected representatives, trusting ordinary citizens. This tension shaped the early republic. Andrew Jackson, a populist president, expanded the franchise. He mobilized voters partly through the spoils system. Under this system, government jobs were given based on political patronage. Any ordinary American, it was argued, could do government work. This led to widespread corruption and incompetence in the 19th century. Cities were run by political machines like Tammany Hall. Jobs were rewards for loyalty, not merit. This contrasted sharply with European nations developing professional civil services. The U.S. was slow to adopt a merit-based system. This was partly due to cultural suspicion of government power. Reform came only after President James Garfield was assassinated by a disappointed office seeker in 1881. The Pendleton Act of 1883 established the Civil Service Commission. It mandated hiring based on merit. However, it took decades for the majority of federal workers to be covered by this system. Progressive-era figures like Theodore Roosevelt and Woodrow Wilson pushed for a modern state. They recognized that complex government required educated, expert officials dedicated to public service. This laid the foundation for the modern bureaucracy. The U.S. remains unique among wealthy democracies in its discomfort with bureaucracy. European and Asian nations largely accept the need for an impersonal state. They see it as necessary for stability and fighting corruption. In the U.S., patronage persists. A change in administration opens thousands of positions to political appointees. This is far more than in parliamentary systems. Politicians often avoid being seen as supporting bureaucrats. Federal pay raises are capped and hiring freezes imposed. This happens despite federal employees not being particularly well paid compared to the private sector or other countries. Congress limited the number of federal bureaucrats over half a century ago. There are fewer full-time federal officials now than in the 1960s. Yet, government spending has increased dramatically. To function, the government relies heavily on outsourcing. Jobs are contracted out to private companies and nonprofits. This allows politicians to claim they are limiting the size of government bureaucracy. This outsourcing creates a shadow bureaucracy. Its employees are not counted on the federal payroll. This obscures the true size and cost of government operations. Today's bitter political divide has further politicized the bureaucracy. Nonpartisan centers of expertise exist, like NASA or the CDC. They are staffed by professionals chosen for their skills. However, these institutions and their staff face increasing criticism. Career professionals in agencies like the State Department or NOAA have been denigrated. This raises concerns about attracting future talent. Attacks on the deep state are seen by some as attacks on the rule of law. Public officials must implement policies, but they also have a higher duty. They must uphold the Constitution. They must exercise judgment if a policy seems illegal or unconstitutional. This requires a degree of independence and loyalty to the law, not just a political boss. Consider a hypothetical crisis: a president refusing to leave office after losing an election. If the military were ordered to support this, individual officers would face a choice. Their loyalty would be tested. In such a scenario, the rule of law is not a physical barrier. It is a set of beliefs held by those in power. A professional, non-partisan civil service, a form of deep state in the functional sense, could be crucial. It could preserve constitutional government. It provides institutional memory and expertise. It acts as a check against potentially unlawful orders. The Trump administration brought the deep state concept into mainstream political discourse. Early in his term, a key strategist spoke of deconstruction of the administrative state. This referred to reducing regulations and shrinking government. Over time, the term took on a more sinister meaning for some. It suggested a secretive group of bureaucrats actively sabotaging the president's agenda. This narrative was fueled by leaks and investigations. Accusations of a deep state plot were used to explain scrutiny of the administration. This narrative resonated with supporters who distrusted established institutions. It painted career officials as partisan enemies. However, many long-serving government officials found the term disturbing. They noted its origins in countries with genuinely undemocratic power structures. Applying it to the U.S. civil service was seen as inaccurate and misleading. They argued it was an attempt to delegitimize dissent or criticism from within government. It created an environment of fear and suspicion. It ignored the professional, nonpartisan role of civil servants. Former officials emphasized the purpose of the civil service. Created to end the spoils system, it ensures expertise and continuity. It allows administrations to set direction while relying on professional knowledge for implementation. Every new administration faces challenges working with the bureaucracy. Political appointees often arrive with urgency and distrust of established procedures. They want quick action. Democrats may seek to liberate bureaucrats from rules to implement policies faster. Republicans may seek to reduce the size and scope of government. Both can struggle with the pace and complexity of the federal system. However, career federal employees are generally committed to executing the laws faithfully. They provide essential expertise and institutional memory. They ensure continuity across administrations. Presidents who fail to understand or utilize the bureaucracy risk undermining their own agendas. Government functions rely on the daily work of millions of civil servants. They collect taxes, deliver mail, and manage complex programs. Even when criticizing the deep state, administrations rely on it. Complex policy decisions, like military actions, require the expertise of career professionals for execution. They provide the knowledge of how to get things done. The Trump administration faced self-inflicted crises, partly due to bypassing established processes and expertise. Decisions on travel bans or military policy sometimes lacked input from relevant agencies. This highlighted the need for professional advice. Skepticism towards expertise in science also marked the era. This included questioning climate data or dismissing the advice of public health officials. Such actions can damage the capacity of government agencies. A paradox emerged. While criticizing the bureaucracy, the administration was slow to fill political appointments. This left career staff in charge, highlighting their essential role in keeping the government running. Efforts to boost efficiency, like proposed agency reorganizations, often relied on input from career staff. Budget officials acknowledged that outsiders couldn't navigate the complexities without their help. This demonstrated the indispensable knowledge held by civil servants. Career employees are the backbone of government operations. They ensure programs are implemented and people are kept safe. They provide the technical and institutional knowledge needed for effective governance. They understand that new administrations want change, but they also advise on what is legally and practically feasible. Listening to their expertise is crucial for successful policy implementation. The deep state label, suggesting a planned conspiracy, is seen as irrational by many who have worked in government. They argue that federal employees need political supervision, but also professional independence to uphold the law. The relationship between political leaders and the civil service is cyclical. New administrations often arrive with suspicion, seeking to assert control. Over time, they realize they need the expertise and stability provided by career professionals. The deep state is a powerful, often misleading term. It taps into public distrust of government and hidden power. While it can point to legitimate concerns about influence and bureaucracy, it is frequently used to delegitimize opponents and institutions. Understanding the machinery of government requires looking beyond simplistic labels. It involves recognizing the roles of career civil servants, political appointees, and powerful external actors like contractors. It means grappling with the historical evolution of the American state and its unique challenges. The debate over the deep state is ultimately a debate about who holds power and how government should function. It raises critical questions about accountability, transparency, and the balance between political control and professional expertise. Engaging with these questions is vital for a healthy democracy. Explore the complexities of government power. Learn more about the roles of civil servants, contractors, and elected officials. Share this information to foster informed discussion and demand greater transparency and accountability from all who influence public policy.